Good morning. I'm Lindy Lavender. I am the person who gets to help the wonderful Water and Environment Planning team plan these meetings. So thank you all so much for being here and for joining the East Bay Leadership Council this morning. As usual, I just like to start off by saying please stay on mute if you're able to during these meetings. It just makes the person who's speaking not have any background noise and helps us kind of keep these meetings running smoothly. Other than that, if you do have a question, as George kind of mentioned, if you were here, we are happy to have you kind of jump in. Maybe just raise your hand so that we can bring the attention to you. If you aren't comfortable or don't prefer to ask your question live, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat. And George would be happy to help facilitate those questions, perhaps towards the end of the presentation today. And we're really excited to have Marathon here with us. Really appreciate you all and are excited to learn more about this project. So I'm going to hand it on over to Gary to kind of kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Lindy. As George kind of mentioned as we're coming on, we were able to have our first planning committee. There's a group of 10 of us that get together every 3 months or so and plan out our agendas moving forward. And Dan's going to cover that in just a moment to give you an idea of the talks that are coming up. But we're able to do that in person. And so thank you, Lindy, and thank you to East Bay Leadership for allowing that to happen. We met outside on a patio and had appropriate distancing. And I know the organization is thinking about how do we get back in person. I know I, for one, am very anxious to be able to do that and see everybody's faces and network, right? That's a big part of why we get together, is to network with each other. So I'm looking forward to that. So since last time, the state is even further in a drought. And as far as I know, in terms of the Bay Area agencies, the investments that they have made over the last couple of decades put us in pretty good shape right now. We're not into mandatory rationing. Nothing like what's happening in Marin County right now, where they literally just depend on local storage, and they are very, very short of water. So they're imposing very strict conservation guidelines, and they're even talking about in Marin reconstituting the desalination project at the foot of the bridge, the San Rafael Bridge, and or putting a pipeline like happened in the 76-77 drought from the East Bay mud service area over to Marin. So it's much more dire in Marin than it is around the rest of the Bay Area. And for the water agencies that are on, if there are conservation or there are measures that your district is taking, if you don't mind putting that in the chat so that we can all see it, I'd appreciate that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to look at, review the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so we got some meetings planned for next month on June 15th. We're going to have a presentation on the Harvest Water Recycled Water Project for conjunctive use. This is ag interest and environmental interest working together on improving regional and statewide storage of water underground. So that's an interesting topic that's coming up here in a month. Tentatively, we have a meeting planned in July, as a presentation by the state water contractors on the Delta Conveyance Project to get an update on that. We're trying to confirm that. And then in August, we're hoping to get an update on Cargill's South Bay Stewardship Project. So we're waiting to see if those are set. So the June meeting is set, and the next two are tentative. And we have a lot of items on our list, but we're always looking for other items, so we can always pick the best topics of the best. So if any of you have some ideas, get a hold of anybody on the planning committee like me or Gary or George, and we'll get your idea in the hopper.
Okay, thanks, Dan. All right, there's no other announcements or comments now. I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers for the day. We're pleased to have Marathon here, their management team, to talk about their Martinez Renewable Fuels project. They've been in demand on the speakers tour. I sat in their meeting last Wednesday, I think, for the Industrial Association. So this is at least two that I know of in 1 week that these folks are presenting. The presenters today, we have Scott Hanks. He's the plant general manager for Martinez. And before we came online here, he mentioned he'd served in 8 different refinery locations within their organization, including, I think, most recently Gallup, New Mexico, where he had about it sounded like maybe a 2 or 3 minute commute to work. We have Amber Larson, who's the environmental safety and security manager for the facility. Nicole Carranza, who's the local public affairs and community investments manager. And then Steve Koenig is sitting in today, doesn't have an active speaking role. He's the state government relations director. And Steve, you're welcome to jump in with comments and participate if you wish. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott to kick it off.
Okay, if Lindy, you can open up the presentation, go to the cover slide, please. So beautiful picture of our region here, and just wanted to tell everybody there's 3 of us going to be on the call. Again, my name is Scott Hanks. I'm the general manager. We have Amber Larson, who is our HES manager, does a wonderful job, and Nicole Carranza, who is also and responsible for community relations within our area, that does a wonderful job. So anyway, just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'll let my associates kind of introduce themselves when they get to their turn. But I'm married with 2 sons. We actually live right here in the Clayton area. We just moved here in December of this past year. And it was my first trip to California. Just like George mentioned there just a minute ago, I've actually worked in 8 separate states. I've been in a total of 14 locations, but this is my first trip to California, and I'm definitely very excited about it. In addition to that, I also just wanted to mention I'm very much into the outdoors. Really love to mountain bike. So that's the one thing that's been very cool about coming to the California region, is I definitely have a lot of options to choose from out here. And but if any of you guys want to take an old person on a tour with me, please give me a call. I would definitely love to go out with you sometime. Anyway, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, I don't expect anybody to read this. This is unfortunately is required by our attorneys within the company. But what this basically does is our presentation discuss some type of forward projections, or basically a discussion of our plans going forward. But in essence, none of those should be considered as guarantees for the company. As you can imagine, we're trying to predict the future, but that is just an impossible thing at this particular time. So our attorneys require us to place this at the beginning of our presentations. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so just a little bit about Marathon Petroleum Company. You know, we're kind of new in the West. We actually came out here in about 2018, but we are a company that's well over 100 years old. We started off as Ohio Oil Company many years ago. And believe it or not, we're actually part of Standard Oil under the Rockefellers many years ago. We purchased our first refinery in 1924. That's what was called the Linco refinery. We still own that today. It's actually the Robinson, Illinois refinery, located near the southern part of Illinois. We are, in terms of the Fortune 500 list, we were number 22 on the list. Very proud of that. That was basically published statistics in the year 2020. And geographically, you know, if you were to kind of take a look at the whole portfolio of Marathon, we have 13 active refineries running today. We have integrated pipelines all over the United States to supply those refineries. We also have crude oil gathering and also natural gas gathering facilities. And in addition to that, the one thing a lot of people don't know about us is we also have a large inland water fleet. So in other words, we move a lot of materials between our locations by the inland waterways. As a matter of fact, what a lot of people don't know is one of the largest inland ports in the United States is in Eastern Kentucky at our Catlettsburg refinery. Tremendous amount of product moves in and out of there from that location right there. The next bullet point, the one thing I definitely want to stress about Marathon is we are an industry leader when it comes to environmental responsibility and our safe operations. This is one thing that I'll be very honest with you. I am very proud. I cannot tell you how proud I am to be a part of this company. And we always try to do the right thing. And I try to stress upon my folks that if you come to work every day and you focus on the people, the environment, production, you always keep them in that order, that we're going to be a successful plant. And I'm very committed to that. I've never in any of my career at Marathon have ever felt like I had to do the wrong thing. I always felt like I was given the opportunity to do the right thing every day. I'm very proud of that. One other thing to note is, again, the pipeline assets, again, MPLX, the transportation side of that is all governed under a company called MPLX LP. So Lindy, let's go to the next slide. So, you know, what a lot of people have asked me is like, hey, Marathon's just getting into the renewables business. But I think what I wanted to try to convey is that we've kind of been in this space for a little while. Now, the Martinez renewable fuels, which you're going to hear more about here in a little bit, is we're hoping to produce about 730,000 gallons of fuel on an annual basis. That's at the conclusion of phase 3, sort of toward the end of 2023. That's where we hope to be when this is all said and done. But we also have another renewable diesel facility in the Dickinson, North Dakota area. And that is a facility that is about 1/4 the size, roughly, in general terms, of where we're going to be here in the Martinez site. So that place has been in operation since the fall of 2020 and continuing to operate very successfully today. We also have a couple of other things. The Beatrice facility in Nebraska, that's actually a pretreatment facility that will provide pretreated fuels for the North Dakota location. And the one kind of unusual statistic is Cincinnati, Ohio. And a lot of people don't know this, but in Cincinnati, Ohio, there was a former P&G or Procter & Gamble site. And many of you may remember this, but several years ago, they produced a fat substitute called Olestra. We've actually taken a portion of those assets and converted it to a biodiesel facility in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I don't remember the exact date of that, but I believe it was around 2012, 2013. That became part of our assets. The other thing that's kind of neat is we're also in the ethanol business. We have a joint venture with the Andersons, and they operate 3 ethanol plants on our behalf. That's kind of neat. Actually, I was been in the ethanol business back when I was a very young engineer in the 1990s. I always thought that was one of the coolest businesses I've ever been, because at the end of the day, I could almost walk or drink or eat just about anything in the facility. So I always thought that was kind of neat. 2 other renewable businesses within our portfolio. One is Fulcrum Bioenergy. This is a company that we're working with. Believe it or not, it's kind of like a garbage to biocrude processing. And then you take that biocrude to a typical refinery and you run that. But it's essentially, it's a garbage to like a I guess you would say a synthetic type crude oil material that we can process at one of our other refineries. And last but not least, we have this company called Ryron, and that's a company located in Wisconsin. And essentially their purpose is they take these plant-based sugars and they convert them to like fuel materials, and also to plastics too. So it's a technology-driven company. I don't remember the exact time when we acquired that location, but anyway, that's just another part of our portfolio. So again, the purpose behind this slide was to try to say is, hey, we're not only getting into the renewables business in full force in the state of California, but at the same time, this is something that we've been doing for some time, and we see it as a very big part of our future. Okay, with that, let's go to the next slide. Hey, so this is just a little bit about Martinez. Most of you guys know this. We're located on a little over a couple thousand acres, and we started our first operations back in the early 1900s. And then Marathon acquired the site in late 2018. As you all know, 2020 was like an extremely tough year for us. When COVID kind of hit, and we already were kind of experiencing some demand destruction. At the same time, we made a decision at that time to indefinitely idle the assets. It was a very, very difficult decision for the company. And of course, I experienced this both at Gallup, New Mexico and here, but quite a few people were laid off as a portion of that and separated. And that was very difficult. And, you know, it's definitely not something that we want to do. We definitely want to retain our wonderful employees and providing great employment for them in the future so that they can take care of their children. At the same time, we also saw, well, maybe there is a way that we can resurrect the site. So in other words, maybe we can invest and become a renewable diesel facility. And so also about the same time, we were doing a lot of engineering and really exploring the permitting needs in case we were to resurrect the facility to make renewable diesel. And that's not a small task. If you just look at the rough numbers, we had about 50 employees, give or take, full time just working on the engineering. And from a contract basis, about 3 times that, just all associated with doing the engineering work to say, hey, can we convert these assets? Can we make a new facility here? And so we've spent a tremendous amount of time on that. Unfortunately, in February of 2021, we took this to the board of directors, and the board of directors authorized the transition of Martinez to a renewable diesel facility. And so that was a very cool day for us. One of the best pieces of news that we've had in this location in a very long time. So that kind of gives you a little bit about Marathon, gives you a little bit about our renewables history, and at the same time, a little bit of history about the site and what our path forward is. And so with the next slide, I shall turn that over, I believe, to Amber Larson.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So to follow in Scott's footsteps, I'll give you a little bit of my history. This is my 4th location within the company. I came to Marathon through the Tesoro acquisition in 2018. In 2019, in September, I was asked to move to Martinez. So I did. I moved my family, 2 school-age kids, and my husband, a couple dogs. Came to Martinez, love it. We're hikers, so we've been hiking all over the place. Unfortunately, in April, the decision was made to idle our facility. And then in August, the decision was made to indefinitely idle, as Scott was saying. Very stressful time, as everybody had for 2020. At that time, wasn't even with the site yet for a full year, so didn't really know what my destination was, but was asked to lead the permitting efforts for this project. As you all know, permitting in the state of California takes on its whole new breath of life compared to other facilities I've ever been at. And the company challenged a 1-year permit timeline. So that was an amazing challenge to take on, but things have been going great and the community has been very supportive, and so have the agency. So really looking forward to continuing to work with everybody and to see this across the finish line. As Scott said, it did bring a new life to the facility and the individuals and employees that did remain. So we are looking forward to this project. But not only is it about the jobs and everything, but it is about the community and what does the project bring to everybody. And it is an environmentally sound project. Overall, we'll see about a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas. That's from cradle to grave. That's from whether it's soybean oil being cultivated and coming up out of the ground, being processed and shipped to us, or from the rendering facilities and then coming to us with the animal fats. So that's a huge reduction that we're seeing in the greenhouse gases. The other thing that we're seeing is criteria air pollutants. In the Bay Area, you'll hear a lot about PM 2.5. You hear about AB 617. You hear all these programs trying to reduce particulate matter in the atmosphere. That includes also your precursors like your NOx and your SO2s and things like that. So we're seeing about a 70% reduction in that by switching over to renewables. And then overall, our facility was a huge water consumer. We're seeing about a 50% reduction in water consumption as well, which is 1 billion gallons less water used annually, which is a pretty big deal. And as Scott said, it will be 730 million gallons per year of renewable fuels that will come out of the facility. So just some fast facts for everybody to be able to kind of rattle off throughout talking. Our feedstocks will be corn oil, soybean oil, your animal fats, your used cooking oil. A couple of things that I like to state about this is palm oil is very controversial. We understand that. We are trying to do sustainable feedstocks. We're working on a certification program. So we are making it very clear in our permit, we are not going to process any palm oil. The other thing that does come up, again, is it has to do with that sustainability and making sure that you're not over harvesting fish and things like that. So we're working on a certification program for that sustainability. So overall, again, that adds to that carbon intensity reduction. So you'll see that kind of in those numbers. Finished products, we're going to end up with some renewable diesel and some renewable propane. There is a naphtha stream that comes off, but that's all blendable. And then there is the possibility of switching it over to renewable, they call it sustainable aviation fuel. You probably saw an announcement come out on us with Southwest. That's future, but we did put it in our permit as a cumulative project, so you will see it there. And then the other thing that we're making sure people understand, because there's always that concern of, yeah, but could you switch back to crude oil at any given time? Well, actually, will not be switching back to crude oil. Once when we get successful completion of our permits, we will actually be foregoing all of our emission credits to be able to even run crude oil through our facility. The timeline is very aggressive, as long, same with the permit, where it's really holding it up is the permit. Otherwise, I think that Scott and his team would be hitting the ground running right now, switching our facility over. But startup is going to be in the second half of 2022, that's 17,000 barrels. We'll have full capacity by the end of 2023 at 48,000 barrels. And the difference between those two is pretreatment. You can bring in treated feed, run it through an HDO unit. We can do about 17,000 barrels there. If we want to bring in feed that has not been pre-treated, we have to have the pretreatment unit. That takes a little bit longer to build, and that's what gets us out to the 2023 and gets us to the full 48,000 barrels. Employment, and this is something that was near and dear for me especially, is that we will still retain about 150 full-time employees, and which is great. And then further on, we'll talk about the contractors for the construction as well. And then for the progress, all of our permits have been submitted. Discussions are going back and forth on the permit. We'll go through the timeline here in a second. We're also having those discussions with feedstock suppliers. If you look at the permit, we did it kind of as an umbrella. We don't have all of our feedstocks acquired at this time. There's a lot of conversations going on. So you'll just see kind of the vehicle miles traveled. We did worst case if it comes by rail and then by ship. So you'll see all that in there as well. And those are what's calculated in those reduction numbers there at the top. And then engineering's underway. As I said, that is full steam away. We're working on our PHAs currently right now. So most engineering is done, just working on any of the safety features that may need to be upgraded in the system. So that's kind of where we are with that. Next slide. A lot of people ask what the renewable fuels process is. It's very similar. If you've ever seen a refinery value chain, this is a refinery value chain. It's very, very similar. A lot of people are like, why are refiners going into renewables? Keep that to the green people. Don't have refiners do it. And to be honest, hydrotreating is hydrotreating. Whether you're removing oxygen or you're removing sulfur, it's kind of the same process. That's how come we can switch it over so quickly. We take an existing hydrotreater, do a couple metallurgy upgrades, and switch it into a renewable diesel. So we will still have our value chain. It has to do with the feedstock coming in, the transportation, as we talked about. You'll see it in truck, rail, and ship. We'll go into terminals. So you'll see some local terminals coming into play. We process it, and then it leaves again out through terminals and or from our own facility via third-party truck or trucks, rail car. You'll see some barge and potentially pipeline, depending on the blending criteria. Renewable diesel is a complete drop-in replacement fuel for petroleum diesel. You will not see a difference in your vehicle. There's no vehicle modifications that are needed. The only reason you will not see 100% renewable diesel being sold at the pump is because of FTC blending requirements. And that's because when biodiesel came out, biodiesel still has an oxygen molecule on it, and you can't put that completely in your engine. It will gum up. It makes more particulate matter, actually. And so the label law kind of just encompasses all bio-based diesel in that kind of category and hasn't segregated it out yet. So at this time, there'll still be a blending requirement for that renewable diesel. And then it gets out, and you'll see it in our branded stations and unbranded stations. I don't know if you've seen a 76 yet, but they have a big, huge sign on theirs that says renewable diesel. So you'll start seeing more of that around the area in the state of California. Next slide.
Amber, I had a quick question on kind of the feedstock supply.
Yeah.
You mentioned the oils and animal fats, et cetera, would be transported to the facility by a combination of truck, rail, and barge. Do you have a rough breakdown at this point of what percentage of each would apply, or is that still yet to be determined, in your planning process?
Yeah, so that's still yet to be determined of what our feedstock will be. We are targeting 40 CI. So petroleum diesel has about 100 CI carbon intensity. To get to 40, it has to be mostly animal fats. Soybean CI is about 75, and animal fats are 25 to 35. So most of it will be animal fats, but they're all going to come via the same way. Most of them will come from rail over the mountains into a terminal and then barge to us. So whether it's soybean oil or fats, it's going to come in probably the same way to our facility.
We have also on the chat line a question from, I believe it's Brant Manglis. His question is, how large is your supply chain feedstock footprint? Corn, soy, tallow. Brant, you want to jump in and maybe expand on your question?
Yeah, well, I think George, you were reading my mind or I was reading yours. So I think kind of asked the same question. I'm just curious about the feedstock. I know those aren't traditional California source materials, and I'm curious about where it's all coming from.
Yeah, so of course we start at the hub of California, and our feedstock suppliers start branching out from there, because as you can imagine, we again are looking at cradle to grave. So it's not just as it crosses the California border, as it goes into that, again, that CI score that we're targeting. So the closer it can be to us, the lower those emissions are, because transportation adds to that emission number. But you're right, if we're looking at soybean oil and things like that, you're starting to get towards that Midwest region. There's a little bit to the north, but we're trying to keep it as close to California as possible for transportation purposes. It's hard to put animal fats in a pipeline.
Okay, so thank you. Brian, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Well, and then our tentative project timeline. February of 2021, another great moment. Nothing like going to try to get a permit for a project that isn't approved by your board yet for financing. In February 2021, we did get full approval for moving forward on our project, and full funding was granted at that time. In March, we had our public scoping meeting. Most of the comments were about food to fuel, basically the LCFS program. There's some questions about some green hydrogen, and then baseline. So that's kind of been the scope of most of our comments. There's questions about decommissioning. We try to take all those comments, and you'll see it again in the permit. We put them in as standalone items, kind of like our mic drop statements. So make sure everybody understands the full effect of those questions and answers, so they don't have to dig through a 500-page permit to find it. We are looking to go to draft EIR July 5th. That is going to be an amazing milestone to get to, trying to get all the agencies on board. Normally you don't have a self-mitigating project, so it's very hard for all of us to digest it, understand what the next steps are, and what's a true complete EIR when everything's self-mitigating. So we're working with the Air District. We're working with all the agencies, making sure we have all that in place. And then public comment period ends 9/5/2021. With a notice of decision for preparation, we're looking at the end of September. Again, that means our timeline for Q3, Q4 2022 is dependent on a permit in October. And right now we're on track for that.
Mm-hmm. Amber, just one quick question. To receive notices of the public comment meetings, is that done through the agencies such as the Air District and other agencies?
So this one, the county is our lead agency. So the public comments go through the county on these ones. I think they do have a notification on their webpage, but that's a good point. And I could probably talk to Nicole about getting that on our website so that people can find it if they're just looking, because there's a lot of things on the county's website. It's even hard for me to find it.
Right. And I think Ann Spalding has a question on the chat line. Ann, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was really excited about the 70% reduction in air pollutants, but I wondered how the product itself compares between renewable diesel and regular old diesel. And I'm thinking about all the pollutants you mentioned and asthma and, the things that diesel has gotten. That's why we're changing truck engines, blah, blah, blah. So I figure you probably know the answer.
Yeah, it's steep learning curve. Wasn't sure really how to spell renewables until this whole project came out. So There's two studies that are out there. There's one from CRC and another one from Cal EPA on renewable diesel, and they did it in an engine study. They actually burnt it in an engine and tested the pollutants coming out the back end. Overall, both show a reduction in all pollutants coming out of an exhaust. There is a difference on the like your post-treatment technology when you talk about your SCRs or anything like that, that your catalytic converters that you have in your vehicles, especially diesel engines. There's questions about that as that life starts to die and things like that. But overall, I highly recommend reading those two studies if you have time and are interested. It does show a reduction. And then the South Coast is putting together a study as well, where they're looking at older engine models because it takes about 20 years for a fleet to flip over. And so they're looking at, in the next 10 years, the fleet that's on the road, what does that look like in an engine? And that study is supposed to come out here. It's supposed to be 1Q. We're kind of past 1Q. I haven't seen it yet, but when that comes out, maybe we'll put those studies on the website as well, because they're very informative and it's done by a third party. But overall, a reduction.
I'm sorry to re-ask this. So there's no statement you can make about the difference in health impacts between the old and the new product?
All you can talk about really is the amount of reduction in like your NOx, your diesel particulate matter. You could do it from, I can't say that it's going to create less asthma, or because those are EPA criteria of the toxic thresholds.
Right.
And the engines are already below those toxic thresholds technically by EPA standards, but we can show that there's even a further reduction from those numbers in those studies. And I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
But they are in there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And just to add to that, the reason why, if anybody's technical and is wondering why, because I was wondering why there would be a difference as well. When you do crude distillation, there's a lot of molecules in a crude distillation. You have anything from methane to heavy asphalt molecules. And so when you distill, you get kind of this long tail of these heavier molecules in your diesel, and it's loud. And when that burns in your engine, that's what creates the NOx and that particulate matter. When you're doing—
Yes, I'm calling regarding a question on the form property owner's statement of new construction.
Someone needs to unmute.
Oh, the question is, this is for a solar project, and it indicates on the form schematics or pictures, etc. Do you need that for a solar project?
No. Betty,
Oh,
Betty, you're not muted. Thank you.
Somebody needs to mute. Yes, please.
There we go. Sorry about that, Amber.
All right. So with renewables, animal fats and soybean oils, they all have a given chain length. And so you have more control of the molecule that's actually being burned in the engine. And so it does burn cleaner because you just don't have the aromatics. You don't have the sulfur. You know, you hear about sulfur in diesel because renewables just is such a low sulfur material in itself. So that's why you're seeing those reductions at the tailpipe.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, next slide. So just some project construction facts. We'll be repurposing 7 units on our site. We are getting 2 new units. I know the city of Clyde is probably pretty happy about this. The one we talked about is the pretreatment unit. It's going to be the largest in the world. We're going to be serial number 1. When you go and Google renewables, you hear a lot of things about the pretreatment and there being a lot of solid waste in pretreatment because it typically does like diatomaceous earth. We're not using that kind of technology. We're using a technology that's more similar to what we would have used in crude, which is an acid and water and high pressure to relax the molecules to get out of any of those. Human biology, you have metals in you, so it gets those out so that doesn't go and contaminate the catalyst. And then that, because it's biological material, not chemical material, we're going to do a new wastewater treatment plant to process this water to make sure that we have the biological oxygen demand that we need to treat that. So those are going to be our 2 new units. Again, those take a little bit of time to build. That'll be in 2023 and get us to that 48,000. And then the building trades, it's going to be an amazing time for us again, going from that idling and swooping down and starting to see people coming into our facility again. We'll have 1,400 peak contractor workforce during this project and a total of 4 million project hours. So again, it'll be great to see everybody. I can't imagine 1,400 people being in here right now after swooping down, but looking forward to it. And the next slide. And then I'll hand it back to Scott. This is near and dear to him to talk about what we're keeping our eye on during this time.
Hey, a couple other things we just want to kind of close out with, and then especially from Nicole and my behalf, is we wanted to kind of like make a little statement about, you know, impacts to the community. And the first thing that is first and foremost to me is keeping our eye on safety. Most of you all may think that, hey, if you're a shutdown refinery, the risks have to be gone away. But in actuality, that's not really the case, because we're still decommissioning tanks, we're still decommissioning piping and equipment. There's inspections that are going to go on. So that by itself is not an easy task and should never be underestimated. And we're also going to evaluate the contractors we're going to bring in. As you can imagine, 1,400 people here, usually working 2 shifts during the day. And a big portion of our job is going to be safety. The reason this really got my attention, and I wanted to make sure y'all heard it from me, was when we had, I think it was the public comment period subsequent to the NOP. What I remember very clearly is a resident from Richmond saying, hey, that Martinez site is an extremely unsafe facility, and I don't think we should let them run. And I think what I wanted to try to say very carefully and very clearly is that you all have my commitment that we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we're a safe running facility. In addition to that, we're going to protect the contractors and everybody that comes in here and go to work. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Nicole, and I want to also, you know, emphasize our commitment, and she's done a wonderful job at this, to make sure we keep a commitment to the community. Next slide.
Thank you, Scott. And just to echo on what Scott said, you know, we'll be consistently supporting safety and focused on safety and the community. So in previous years, so 1920 years were a little challenging with the changes from Endeavor to Marathon, and then also the COVID pandemic. So our investments were a little bit flat because just, you know, the community organizations were shut down and a lot of things were happening. So I'm happy to say that for 2021, our budget levels are back up. And so, and then another thing I wanted to mention was previously, this has started to change this year, our focus areas were STEM, public safety, environment, and community need. And so through the evolution of our giving program, they have expanded those areas. So now it's broader and more encompassing so that we have more flexibility in the community. So now we have vocational education, and STEM is a part of that. That allows us to sort of focus more towards the older students who would help us develop the workforce pipeline to feed the industry. Environment has now been expanded to sustainability, and public safety and community need and has been wrapped into a new category called thriving communities. So that will help us respond to say things like homelessness or food insecurities, just basically whatever is important for this region or any other region. So as you can imagine, our needs in the Bay Area are much different than say something in Ohio. So that just gives us a lot more flexibility of where we put our investments in the community. And I just want to mention a couple of key projects that we are working on and have supported for a long time. You can see in the picture, we have been the title sponsor of the Scare Away Hunger event, and that's where we partner with all the kids from Concord High. We, you know, fund the entire event, and they have a great deal of participation. I want to say like 120 students and parents. They go out on Halloween night and raise, or they collect all the food bags off the porches. And so I think last year or the year before, it was 16,000 pounds of food in one night. So it makes a big impact. And a couple of other things I want to mention is we're the title sponsor every year for Concord's 4th of July parade. We sponsor the Sheriff's Office Bay Point Rodeo, bike rodeo, where they give away 800 bikes in the community. We just recently sponsored the drone programs for both the city of Martinez and Concord. So pretty significant investments there. I know they're still working on launching those programs, and they've got some community meetings and things they have to do first. We also invested and helped open the Marathon STEM Center at the Boys and Girls Club. And we're also going to be funding their, they're going to be coming into Concord for the summer and starting to support the need for the children in the Monument Corridor. So that's a big step forward for the Concord community. So those are just a few things I wanted to mention that we're doing right now. And I'm always interested to hear from this group or any others about things you know about or ideas you have about how Marathon could support initiatives or community needs that you're aware of. Please reach out to me because we're always looking to be innovative in that area.
Nicole, I think we'll have a question for you on your investment discussion. How I wanted to backtrack a little bit and catch Ernie Avila, who asked a question about, I think it's related to the previous questions. Ernie, you want to jump in about your question about feedstock and supply chain?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask the question. Obviously, one of the things that we always think about, just in water supply, we always think about what is our long-term view and vision for our supply to make sure that we have a high level of reliability. So I was very curious if you could describe just briefly, just one more time, perhaps the reliability of your near-term, long-term feedstock and overall supply chain elements for near-term, long-term production. Are you feeling good about the stock? Are there vulnerabilities along the way that you need to consider? How's that looking?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to that. We have to be careful of how much we talk about. So we did do an analysis of what is out there as far as supply goes. And as you can imagine, being first to the market or soon, early adopter is key in this, as you can imagine. So you're looking at about 260,000 to 500,000 barrels out there of supply. We're not looking for short-term contracts. We are looking for those long-term contracts, and everything is in place there. Again, I can't talk too much to our strategy, but it will be very similar to what we do for our crude oil to make sure that we maintain what we call wet, our facility to maintain being wet during the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Amber, too, I have a question regarding the permitting process to decommission, to idle. Scott mentioned, when you're shutting a facility down, there's very careful regard for safety. But in terms of the permitting process to shut down, which agencies what were the primary agencies you dealt with to idle a facility? And then how does that compare to the agencies for this new facility? Are they essentially the same agencies, or is there a difference there?
Yeah, a lot of the same agencies, quite a few agencies actually, again, in the state of California. But we are maintaining our refinery status, right? All of our permits are still in place. We're operating under a refinery, even though we're not bringing in crude and processing it. So all that stays the same. So we're still doing all of our fence line monitoring. We're still doing all of our LDAR reporting. We're still doing all of our CARB reporting. Everything, all that is still the same. Reports are kind of boring at this time, as you can imagine. But the main one for idling that you're probably aware of is hazardous materials. And so we have been working with the county hazardous materials department. When you decommission and get all that catalyst out, we ended up with 900 flow bins of catalyst that needed to get out and get processed, and it had to be done in 90 days. And then cleaning of our tanks, that's another one that we have to make sure that we have usable material. We're still maintaining those tanks as being used. And then when we decommission them, we have to get that waste off our site as well. So to be honest, the biggest one we've been working with is the hazardous materials department for decommissioning at this time.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
And in addition to that, if I could add one thing, we've also had people come on site, to take a look at what we've done and inspect our records, no different than if we were an active refinery. So I feel comfortable about the position we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is correct. We haven't been short of our audits during this process.
Right. I'm sure. Yeah. So we've got several questions on the chat line. If I may jump into those. Let's see, we've got, catch this from Shireen Sasser has a couple of questions. One of which is, will you be offering youth apprenticeships? And Shireen, you had another one too. So we'll turn the floor over to you for your couple of questions.
good morning. I apologize if this was addressed. I was late to the meeting, but there is a lot of talk happening about youth apprenticeships, which are basically apprenticeships for high school, starting in high school, so 16 through 24. And I was just wondering if that's something that you guys have heard about, and if you would consider perhaps partnering to offer some youth apprenticeships.
Yeah, I'll jump all over that one. That's kind of something that's very near and dear to my heart, working in Garyville, both at the Gallup refineries and also in the Robinson, Illinois refineries. But as you can imagine, there is always turnover in our staff. And what we always want to have is we want to have, let's say, a bench for that matter, of capable people that could come in with some type of mechanical aptitude, some type of mechanical background that could come in and be strong contributors at our facility. We have already visited one of the local schools. I believe it's in Pittsburgh. They actually have a process technology school. We've visited them already. We've already engaged in some of those discussions. There's also a prototyping program that's right here in the city of Concord. I'm also very interested in. And believe it or not, some of the best people that we have hired as operators at some of these former mechanics are people that have been through auto mechanic programs. They're absolutely wonderful operators. So I do see that as a part of our future. Now, the question to you, just to make sure you understand my commitment, is sometimes you have to start earlier. You have to start in like the junior high age to find out which one of these kids are really more apt to go into like the trade school environments. And so, you know, what we've done at other locations is really start at the younger level, so that we can actually provide some type of incentive for them to go into trade schools so they could become our future employees. So I see that as a future. Is that going to happen immediately? I don't see that right now. But at the same time, we've already initiated some of those discussions.
Can I add something to that too? Thank you, Scott. So we do support a lot of programs already at the high schools that we continue to support, like robotics, the construction trades. So those things are happening all the time. And then as Scott mentioned, we do have a partnership with Los Medanos College in Pittsburgh. We have supported their P-Tech program, brought them all new software. We've influenced the curriculum at both LMC and DVC. That's been part of our partnerships going, you know, the past several years, and will continue into the future. So while we may not be able to welcome those apprenticeships right at this moment, we still are investing in the workforce pipeline through our partners.
Okay, thank you. And just moving through the chat line questions, Bryant again has a question about what byproducts and their waste will come out of the renewable diesel process. So asking about byproducts from the process.
Yeah, this one is also in our permit. We've studied it extensively. So if you can imagine a crude process, you have your desalters, you get a bunch of salt out, you have your heavies, you have your sulfur. Renewables, when you hydro treat it, it turns into water. So one of your byproducts is water, mostly water. There's a few metals and things like that. But again, you'll see the huge reduction in all those compared to crude in the permit and the numbers that are coming out of the EIR. As far as other byproducts, again, with crude, you would see a high sulfur, and we actually would turn it into an elemental sulfur. There's not enough sulfur in our feedstock for that. So it will go through a stripper and then an absorber. So one of the waste streams will be that absorber material. Again, I've never turned any corner and saw such a reduction from an environmental standpoint in my life, but this is one of them that is also another reduction that we're seeing in our waste. So we're expecting our hazardous waste to go down. We're expecting our wastewater waste to go down. Overall, just a very, very clean process, but that's mostly the byproduct is water.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I think Scott mentioned one of the new units is a treatment plant, water treatment plant. Don Berger, go ahead and jump in with your question about you had a question about the reduction of 1 billion gallons a year in water savings. Don, you want to just finish the question?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I was just wondering what the % reduction that was from prior water use, if you all knew.
Yeah, that's a 50% reduction. We're shutting down quite a few cooling towers. That also goes into that particulate matter conversation that we talked about. There's not as much sulfur as we talked about. So the strippers, which is where you take steam and you bubble it up through and strip out the sulfur. A lot of those are being shut down because again, there's not that much sulfur. So that's a huge water reduction. Desalters are getting shut down, another huge water reduction. So it's just that it has to do with the toxics and the metals and those materials that are coming in with crude. Since it's not present, a lot of those units are getting shut down. That's where that reduction is coming from.
Mm-hmm. So it's about 50% reduction then.
That's correct.
Right.
And the rough math on this, y'all probably already done it, but I think it's about like 1,900 gallons a minute or something like that. It's definitely not chump change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I just a quick question. What kind of communication happens with the water, the water agencies, they have to be, what goes on, I guess, basically in terms of that communication in advance for that reduction? Is that something that's a necessary step in the process?
Yeah, when we first idled, we had almost 100% reduction other than sanitary water,
Right.
sprinklers on some cooling towers. So we met with them right away, immediately, to let them know what was happening, and then talking to them too about what the future is going to look like. Some of it's well water, but with the Sands District, like our Contra Costa's water rights, some of it comes across the city line. So we had to have a lot of those conversations with them of what the future was going to look like.
Right. Good. Thank you. And then Nicole Shimizu has a question about Amber's, the figure of the 130, 150 full-time employees. Nicole?
About the 100, that's really an Amber and Scott question.
Yeah. The question is I was calling on Nicole Shimizu.
Oh.
If she went, there's two Nicoles. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. I'll go ahead and read her question. Going back to Amber's figure that around 130, 150 full-time employees will be at the new facility. She's wondering if these employees will be folks previously employed that were let go during the idling process, or will facility retooling mean a workforce with a different skill set that's desired and employed? And additionally, are there plans to prioritize hiring locally from the community?
Yeah, those are great questions. So let me just see if I can explain to you what we think is going to happen, because as you can imagine, we are covered under a bargaining agreement with the United States Steelworkers. So our intentions are to comply with that agreement in terms of recalling employees that come back to our location. We also feel, we've done a little study ourselves that at least several of our employees that were separated at some point in time have actually found other jobs. So we do believe there is also going to be some employees that will come that will not have been former employees, just by the sheer fact that the hiring pool has been reduced by the fact that several of our separated employees have found new employment.
Mm-hmm. So Nicole Shimizu, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Okay. And let's see, we have, skipping through here, Bob Brown, I think. Bob Brown has a question. Bob, why don't you jump in with your question about the utilization of East Bay Leadership Council?
Yeah, no, and thanks for being here today. And I just kind of wanted to, East Bay Leadership Council is a very diverse organization, larger business, smaller business, public, nonprofit, education. So kind of just wondering, given where you are in the process, all the agencies, the local that you have to go through, the regional, I know it's a delicate time right now with approvals, but what can we do as an overall organization? Is it at this point in time about raising awareness and answering questions, helping you facilitate meetings like this, or is there at some point an advocacy role, do you think, that we can consider playing? Assuming our full board would want to do that.
Yeah, I think I will defer part of that question to Steve Koenig, but I think the biggest thing that we need help on is when there are I don't know how to put this, when there is misinformation about what our process is, what we plan to do, how many employees we plan to hire. I think the biggest thing that I would like to be able to respond to is effectively be able to address the facts of the project as they stand as a whole. And I think that's really where I kind of need to help. And I think we're very open about that. I think we've been open to tours, we've been open to the building trades coming by, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing. I think I'd like to turn over to Steve because I'm sure he's probably got a comment on that as well.
And I think so. Thanks, Scott. I mean, I think there are the merits of the project, and you know, they are significant environmentally and from jobs perspective. But there's also a broader net that, you know, that may
Steve, we're losing your.
Steve, you're freezing up. Maybe.
Yeah, we lost your audio there for a second, Steve.
There we go.
All right, let me turn off my video. I'm having internet problems here at work, but I'm not sure where you lost me, but I think definitely I'll just start over, right?
Yeah.
With respect to the merits of the project, right? That they're large and beneficial for all Bay Area residents, but I think it's also important to think about the broader implications that that this project brings, both to city services in the terms of property tax base, to the role historically of Marathon in the community, and supporting that indirectly through our foundation that Nicole spoke about, and you know, just for even businesses in the area and the multiplier as folks are in here. So I think there's a lot of ways to think about what the benefits of this project are beyond just the environmental merits that should be, you know, that may resonate with different people on both on this call, but also on stakeholders that are involved in the project. I mean, ultimately, this permit will be approved by the county supervisors, by the board, and you know that they're the ones that really need to feel comfortable that this is a good go forward plan for Contra Costa County that, you know, transitions us into a kind of a greener, lower carbon economy, and quickly. So
good.
I don't know if I answered that, Bob, but
yeah. No, thank you for that. And it's just especially timely the projects that you, and I know P66 has done a presentation to this group as well. I think, you know, we hear a lot about the term just transition. It's ill-defined by, I think, many groups, because, you know, when you look at what's going to make a difference in terms of energy transition, and that's a long curve. It's going to take some time to ramp up, scale up to meet the demand, but I think it's important to note that the innovation is going to come from this industry, and you guys are living proof of that. So I'll get off my soapbox.
I think adding to that, I mean, this is a project that's at scale and delivers emission reduction benefits, you know, right away, right? I mean, 17,000 barrels by the end of next year, 48,000 by the following year. Those are emission benefits that happen now, and they're greenhouse gas reductions, they're criteria pollutants, and they're, you know, they're putting Contra Costa County employees or workers, most of them labor, back to work now. So lots of benefits.
Thank you.
This is something distant in the future.
Thank you, Scott. Nicole Carenza, I had a quick question regarding your last slide, the pie chart on the community investment. Can you provide a little bit more detail on some of those pie sections? For example, the 20% going to the community, is that, would that be something like food bank, kind of feeding the hungry?
Yeah, so our community need, like I said, generally encompasses what the current needs are for the community, whether that's, you know, from in our footprint from like Martinez, Concord, Pittsburgh, Bay Point. And so, yeah, it includes the food bank. It includes things like that bike rodeo. We did do some investments with CORE, which is a homeless organization out of Martinez. So it really encompasses all of that. It previously was more of a just a category that gave us a great deal of flexibility. And so like for instance, one of the things that is new for us is we purchased a big refrigeration trailer for the Bay Church in Bay Point. That's because, you know, the food bank is more of a distributor, and then they have the food go to these certain points where they give out the food. So the Bay Church could only give the food out on one day a week because that was the day they received it. So we've invested in a refrigeration trailer. They can do food distributions multiple days per week. So it just helps us to take any requests in and consider them, how they benefit the community or how we can be a part of supporting those initiatives. And that gives us a bucket like that. But
Right.
now there'll be a bigger focus on it, right? Because before it was 22%. And now that it's formally one of our giving areas, we can do a lot more.
Yeah. I volunteered at the food bank this past December, and during the pandemic, the number I heard of people that were in need of food in the county was over 200,000 people per month in need of food in Contra Costa County. So there was a dire need that got even more severe, you know, during the pandemic. So, you know, thank you to Marathon for your participation in that.
Thank you. That's our pleasure. And just to add on to that, like another distributor is Monument Crisis Center, right? And they serve a large number of community members. Well, under the community need, the Thriving Communities, we were able to just give them a grant for updating all their technology, the things that they use to intake the clients, because if you ever go there, there's a line of people around the building. I think they serve some 200 clients every day that they're open for that. So that helps them be more efficient. And so, like I said, it just gives us flexibility about how we support those organizations.
Right. Thank you. So did I miss any questions on the chat line, or does anyone else have additional questions? Before we sign off,
if not, George, I'd like to give some. If not, George, I wouldn't mind giving some closing comments if we're done with the questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If Lindy could go to the last slide, it shows our little website. If you don't mind, you could share that screen again.
Scott, give me 1 second. Let me pull it back up.
Well, what I wanted to say is, this is really from a personal basis, but if you really take a look at 2020, it was a very tough year. And, we had to, separate several of our employees, which was a very, very difficult thing to do. I've told a lot of people that in the 36 years of my career, the worst thing I've ever had to do is stand in front of an auditorium in front of a bunch of my wonderful employees and say, I'm sorry, but effective at the end of the day, we're going to be transitioning this place and no longer be a refinery. It's one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. Well, to be flat honest with you, I don't want to do that anymore. And what I want to do is I want to build a new facility here. I want to resurrect this place and provide employment for my wonderful employees, and at the same time transition this place to produce a wonderful new renewable fuel. I would like for your support on that, and I also want to entertain, if you guys got any questions after the presentation that you all want to give us a call or something after the fact, please take them to Nicole or Amber or myself, and we'll try to get whatever questions that you have answered. And again, I want to thank you guys very much for the time today. That's all I have to do.
Thank you so much. And it's always a good sign when the Q&A aspect is so active. I really appreciate all the participation with questions today. And thanks very much to Scott and your team. See, we had a website that's now being posted on the chat line that Patty Deutsch had prompted and Nicole has provided. Just www.marathonmartinezrenewables.com. And Nicole Carranza has provided her email for additional questions, suggestions. This doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. So we can, as Scott said, keep the door open to communication. Kristen Connolly jumped in. Kristen, did you want to jump in?
Hi, George. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kristen.
Thank you. Just Scott and Amber and Nicole, great job. It's a really big deal to make this kind of a scale change at a facility that has such a long history in our community. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad so many people listened in. And so, you know, I swear Bob Brown was not a plant asking the question how EVLC can be helpful, but that is something that we, you know, we are a member organization and we care a lot about how we can promote innovation and how we can support our members and how we can lift up the economy. And so,
Right.
you know, so we are a big tent. So, you know, I appreciate Ann's question about health and emissions. So, but I did want to point you toward the link in the chat for the Senator Glazer event in case any of you are not yet registered. We have an event tomorrow with Senator Glazer from 11 to 12. And as you know, those aren't really kind of softball puffy meetings. I tend to try to make the most of any time that I have with any member of the state legislature, especially the week after the governor's May revise is out. And so we've set this up with Senator Glazer with a focus on infrastructure investments, but there aren't any questions that are off the table. So just really want to encourage, and it's free for members. So please consider joining us, and the link to register is in the chat. So I think I'll leave it there, but thanks to all the magnificent water leaders and environmental and manufacturing leaders that come together for this, what we call the WE task force. And as always, a big hat tip to the world's best policy person, Lindy Lavender.
Right.
So, hey, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, Mr. Whitley.
Thanks for a great presentation, an observation, and then a comment. My observation is that you've got a very aggressive timeline to get through the permit process, in my opinion, particularly since the size and the scope and the impact of what you're trying to do, which is all supportable. But, and maybe following up with Kristen and Bob Brown's comment, as the permit process goes along, please include us in your plan B for if that process gets too extended and starts to create issues as far as how you proceed. Maybe the East Bay Leadership Council could provide some support, should provide some support, but also some experience that might guide you so that you get to the success and not just get frustrated by the process. So that's my comment.
We definitely appreciate the offer on that. And we also recognize that when I try to think about it, you really look at it from my perspective, about a year from now, we're going to have feedstocks in the tanks and we're going to be starting to start this place up. That is not it may sound like that's a long time, but it's going to be like tomorrow. And we're working on it very aggressively. So I definitely appreciate your support.
Mm-hmm. Scott, thank you. I think your experience at Gallup, New Mexico, in the small town, you brought over that kind of open door, community interaction. So that comes across loud and clear. We appreciate that. So thank you. I think Nicole mentioned Carranza has a comment about the website, a new feature.
Sure. Thanks, George. I just wanted to mention to everyone that we're working on a separate feature of the microsite, which will allow our supporters to go and basically send the turnkey email to the key decision makers on the project. So once that's live, I'll reach back out to George and this group and ask you all, whoever is supportive, to go ahead and help by sending that email out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Kristen wanted to mention that we, East Bay Leadership Council, we truly appreciate Marathon as your sponsorship for tomorrow's event with Senator Glazer. That should be an outstanding meeting. We look forward to everybody's participation. Thanks again to Marathon for your sponsorship. So any of the co-chairs have concluding comments? Dan or Gary?
Yep, thank you, George. And we had a good attendance today, 40 people that shows a high level of interest. When we combined the Environment and Water Task Force last year, we started talking about what the focus ought to be for 2021. And we started the year with the Lawrence Livermore National Lab talking about how to get to carbon neutral by 2045. That was a fascinating presentation, and we've focused on a big solar project in Livermore. We focused on Phillips 66 and now Marathon. So, you know, with the state legislature driving the interest of our state to move away from petroleum products, you see a lot of pivoting going on. And so I think all of these presentations have been very timely, and yes, we'd like to help where we can, you know, and however that transition is going to take place. Just to remind you then, next month we move back to the more water topics. Dave Richardson is lining up 2 speakers, one from SAC Regional to talk about one of the largest recycled water projects in California, and also a secondary topic on energy innovation that Doug Wallace will present. That is June the 15th. And I know our state is moving towards a lot of change related to meetings, and Kristen is monitoring this very closely. So I'm very anxious to, you know, get back to meeting in person, but we won't do that until, of course, it's allowed to do that and it's safe. So in the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and thank you with the marathon speakers. And that's it. Yeah, thanks, George.
All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Look forward to staying in touch with the marathon folks as the project moves forward. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.